My name is Anna, and I am 33 years old. I work as a software engineer for Safe Haven Inc., a company that specializes in smart home security systems. After years of careful saving and planning, I finally achieved what felt like the impossible dream for someone from my modest background. I bought my own apartment in Brookdale. It wasn't just any apartment either. It was a spacious two-bedroom unit on the 15th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the entire space in natural light. The view of the city skyline at sunset was worth every penny of the down payment I'd scraped together. The day I moved in, I stood in my empty living room, keys clutched in my hand, and felt tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated joy. This was mine, every square foot, every wall, every window. Mine. No more cramped studio apartments with paper-thin walls. No more questionable roommates who ate my food and never cleaned. No more landlords who ignored maintenance requests until mold started growing in the bathroom corners. I'd furnished the place exactly how I wanted it. Clean. Modern lines with splashes of color from carefully chosen artwork. My home office was my sanctuary. Equipped with dual monitors. An ergonomic chair that cost more than I care to admit. And a standing desk that adjusted to the perfect height. The spare bedroom served as a combination guest room and storage space. Though I rarely had visitors, I valued my privacy too much. Working from home had become my preferred arrangement long before it became trendy. Safe Haven had been ahead of the curve in that regard. And as one of their senior developers, I had the flexibility to set my own hours as long as I met my project deadlines. The apartment's quiet atmosphere was perfect for concentration. And I'd installed one of our company's premium security systems throughout the unit. What I didn't tell my family was that I'd customized it beyond the standard package. Every room had discrete cameras that recorded continuously to a secure server, motion sensors, door and window alarms, even smart locks that tracked every entry and exit. Some might call it paranoid. I called it prudent. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd grown up in a household where privacy was a foreign concept. My parents believed in an open-door policy that extended far beyond keeping bedroom doors unlocked. They shared everything, expected everyone else to share everything, and considered boundaries to be a sign of selfishness or secretiveness. My older sister, Melissa, had thrived in that environment, always the golden child who could do no wrong. She was outgoing where I was introverted, spontaneous where I was methodical, charming where I was awkward. Growing up, Melissa had been the star of every family gathering. She'd married young to her high school sweetheart, popped out 2 kids in quick succession, and seemed to embody everything our parents considered successful. Meanwhile, I was the weird one who spent too much time with computers, who preferred coding to dating, who saved money instead of spending it on designer handbags and salon treatments. But here's the thing about being the overlooked sibling: it gives you the freedom to build your life exactly how you want it. While Melissa was busy playing happy families and posting curated photos on social media, I was advancing my career, investing wisely, and planning for a future that depended on no one but myself. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was in the middle of debugging a particularly stubborn piece of code when my phone buzzed with Melissa's ringtone. I almost didn't answer. We rarely talked outside of mandatory family gatherings, and when we did, it was usually because she needed something. "Anna, sweetie, how are you?" Her voice was syrupy sweet, which immediately put me on alert. Melissa only used that tone when she wanted a favor. "I'm fine, working. What's up?" There was a pause, then a theatrical sigh. "I have some news. Brad and I are getting divorced." I blinked at my monitor, trying to process this information. Brad and Melissa had been together for 15 years. They were the couple everyone envied, at least on social media. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, because it seemed like the appropriate response. "It's been coming for a while," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "He's been having an affair with his secretary. Can you believe it? Such a cliché." I made sympathetic noises while privately thinking that Brad had always struck me as the type who would cheat with his secretary. He had that particular combination of ego and insecurity that made infidelity almost inevitable. The thing is, Melissa went on, I need to get away for a few days, clear my head, you know. And I was wondering if the kids and I could come visit you, just for a long weekend. It would mean so much to have family around right now. Every instinct screamed at me to say no. My apartment was my sanctuary, my escape from the chaos of family drama. But the tremor in her voice sounded genuine. And despite our complicated relationship, she was still my sister. Just for a few days, I confirmed. Of course, we'll be out of your hair before you know it. The kids are so excited to see Aunt Anna and your new place. That should have been my second warning. Alex and Ben had never shown the slightest interest in me or my living situation. But guilt is a powerful motivator, especially when wielded by someone who's mastered the art of manipulation. Okay, I heard myself saying. When were you thinking? This Friday, if that works for you. 3 days. I could handle 3 days. Sure, I'll prepare the guest room. You're the best, Anna. Really, I don't know what I'd do without you. After we hung up, I stared at my code for a full 5 minutes without seeing it. Something felt off about the conversation, but I couldn't pinpoint what. Maybe it was just my natural introversion recoiling at the thought of house guests. Or maybe it was the fact that in 33 years, Melissa had never once told me I was the best at anything. I spent Thursday evening preparing for their arrival. The guest room got fresh sheets and extra pillows. I bought kid-friendly snacks and juice boxes, even though I had no idea what 8- and 5-year-olds actually ate. The bathroom got stocked with fresh towels and travel-sized toiletries. I even went so far as to child-proof some of the more obvious hazards, though I drew the line at covering every sharp corner with foam padding. Friday afternoon arrived with the typical Seattle drizzle that made everything look gray and miserable. I was putting the finishing touches on a project when the doorbell rang. Through the security app on my phone, I could see Melissa and the boys standing in the hallway. What I couldn't see was the mountain of luggage behind them. I opened the door with what I hoped was a welcoming smile. Hey, come in. How was the drive? Melissa burst into tears and threw her arms around me. Oh, Anna, it's been so awful. You have no idea what I've been going through. Over her shoulder, I could see Alex rolling his eyes while Ben stood sucking his thumb, looking lost. Neither boy made any move to greet me. Let's get you inside, I said, gently extricating myself from her embrace. Kids, you can put your bags in the guest room. That's when I saw it. Not just overnight bags or even regular suitcases. We're talking multiple large suitcases, cardboard boxes sealed with packing tape, what looked suspiciously like a disassembled bunk bed, and several trash bags that presumably contained clothes or toys. Melissa, I said slowly, this looks like more than a weekend's worth of stuff. She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, I might have overpacked a little. You know me, always prepared for anything. Brad's being such an ass about the separation. And I wanted to make sure the boys had everything they might need. I wanted to point out that everything they might need apparently included their entire bedroom. But Alex chose that moment to announce he was hungry. And Ben started crying because he'd left his favorite stuffed animal in the car. The next hour was a blur of hauling luggage, finding snacks, and retrieving the beloved stuffed rabbit from Melissa's SUV. By the time everyone was settled, my pristine apartment looked like a tornado had hit it. Boxes were stacked in the hallway. The guest room was overflowing with possessions, and somehow there were already crayon marks on my coffee table. This is just temporary, Melissa assured me as she surveyed the chaos. I'm already looking at apartments. There's a really cute complex near the boys' school that has availability next month. Next month? The words echoed in my head like a death knell. But what was I supposed to do? Throw my newly divorced sister and her traumatized children out on the street? Mom and Dad would never forgive me. Hell, I'd never forgive myself. Of course, I said, forcing a smile. Take all the time you need to get back on your feet. Melissa hugged me again, and this time I caught a whiff of expensive perfume mixed with something else. Wine. Maybe it was barely 5 o'clock. You're such a good sister, she murmured. I knew I could count on you. That evening set the pattern for what was to come. Melissa commandeered my kitchen to make dinner, using approximately every pot and pan I owned in the process. The boys ate about 3 bites each before declaring they were full and running off to play video games on the TV. Melissa opened a bottle of wine she'd brought and proceeded to drink most of it while regaling me with the sordid details of Brad's affair. Can you believe he tried to gaslight me? She said, words slightly slurred. Said I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. Meanwhile, he's sneaking around with that 22-year-old bimbo from his office. I made appropriate noises of outrage while internally wondering how someone could be a bimbo and a secretary simultaneously. Wasn't that contradictory? But Melissa was on a roll, and interrupting her mid-rant seemed unwise. The worst part is what this is doing to the boys, she continued, refilling her glass for the 4th time. They're so confused and hurt. They need stability right now. You know, they need family. Have they talked to Brad since you left? Her face darkened. That bastard doesn't deserve to talk to them. Not after what he's done to our family. But he's still their father, I ventured carefully. Don't they miss him? They have me, she snapped. That's all they need. I decided not to push the issue. Melissa in a mood was not someone you wanted to cross. I'd learned that lesson many times growing up. The weekend passed in a blur of chaos. The boys were not the well-behaved angels Melissa had implied they would be. Alex, at 8, had already mastered the art of selective hearing and passive-aggressive resistance. When asked to clean up his toys, he'd stare at me blankly as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. Ben, meanwhile, expressed his emotional distress by having screaming meltdowns at the slightest provocation. The wrong color cup at breakfast could trigger a 20-minute tantrum. Melissa seemed oblivious to their behavior. Or perhaps she was just too absorbed in her own drama to notice. She spent most of Saturday on her phone, alternating between tearful calls to friends and furious text exchanges with Brad. When she wasn't on her phone, she was drinking wine and watching reality TV at a volume that made it impossible for me to work. By Sunday evening, I was counting down the hours until Monday morning when I assumed they'd be leaving. I'd already fallen behind on my project. My apartment was a disaster zone, and I'd developed a constant low-grade headache from the noise. So, I said over dinner, trying to sound casual, what time were you planning to head out tomorrow? Melissa looked at me blankly. Head out? What do you mean? Well, you said you were just staying for the weekend. Oh, Anna, I can't possibly leave yet. I have a meeting with a divorce lawyer on Tuesday. And it doesn't make sense to drive all the way back to Riverside just to turn around and come back. You don't mind if we stay a few more days, do you? I did mind. I minded very much. But the words stuck in my throat as she looked at me with those big blue eyes that had always gotten her whatever she wanted. I suppose a few more days would be okay, I heard myself saying. You're the best, she beamed at me. Boys, isn't Aunt Anna the best? Alex grunted without looking up from his tablet. Ben ignored the question entirely, too busy smearing ketchup on his plate in what I assumed was meant to be art. Monday morning brought a new set of challenges. I retreated to my home office, hoping to salvage something from my work schedule. But the noise from the living room made concentration impossible. Melissa had decided this was the perfect time to have a loud, emotional phone conversation with our mother. Can you believe what he's putting me through? Mom, after everything I've done for him, everything I've sacrificed, I could hear Mom's responses leaking through the phone speaker, full of sympathy and outrage on Melissa's behalf. No one seemed to consider that maybe, just maybe, there were two sides to this story. Around noon, Melissa knocked on my office door. Hey, I hate to ask, but I have that lawyer meeting tomorrow and I was wondering if you could watch the boys. It shouldn't take more than a couple of hours. I stared at her, fingers frozen over my keyboard. I have to work, Melissa. I can't just take time off to babysit. Oh, come on, you work from home. You can keep an eye on them while you work. They'll probably just watch TV anyway. Anyone who's ever tried to work while supervising children knows this is a fantasy on par with unicorns and world peace. But Melissa had already turned away, assuming my agreement. Please, Anna. She paused in the doorway, using the voice that had always worked on our parents. I really need this. I can't take them with me to discuss the ugly details of their father's infidelity. And just like that, I was trapped. Refuse. And I was the heartless sister who wouldn't help family in need. Agree. And I was setting a precedent I knew I'd regret. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. But just this once. She blew me a kiss. You're a lifesaver. Tuesday was a disaster. The boys, sensing weakness, decided to test every boundary they could find. Alex discovered my gaming console and proceeded to play it at maximum volume despite repeated requests to turn it down. Ben, meanwhile, got into my art supplies and decided the living room wall needed some additional decoration. It's just washable marker, Melissa said breezily when she returned 4 hours later instead of the promised 2. It'll come right off. Narrator, it did not come right off. The few more days stretched into a week, then 2. Melissa always had an excuse. The apartment viewings fell through. The lawyer needed additional documents. The boys were having a hard time adjusting. Each excuse came wrapped in guilt and manipulation, delivered with the expertise of someone who'd spent a lifetime perfecting the art. My work began to suffer. I missed a deadline for the first time in 5 years, earning a concerned email from my supervisor. My sleep schedule was shot, courtesy of Ben's nightmares and Alex's late-night gaming sessions. The apartment I'd worked so hard for no longer felt like mine. The security cameras captured it all. Melissa helping herself to my expensive groceries without asking. The boys breaking things and Melissa hiding the evidence. Late-night wine binges where she'd pass out on the couch, leaving the TV blaring. I watched the footage sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, feeling like a stranger in my own home. 3 weeks into their temporary stay, our parents called for a family video chat. I should have known it was an ambush. Anna, sweetheart, Mom began, her face filling my laptop screen. Melissa's told us how wonderful you've been, opening your home to her and the boys during this difficult time. It's what family does, I replied, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Exactly. Dad chimed in. Family supports family. Which is why we wanted to talk to you about making this arrangement more permanent. I felt my blood run cold. Permanent? Well, semi-permanent, Mom clarified. Just until Melissa gets back on her feet, she's going through such a hard time, and the boys need stability. Your apartment is big enough, and you're already working from home. You want me to let them live here indefinitely? I couldn't hide my incredulity. Not indefinitely, Dad said. Just until the divorce is finalized and Melissa finds a good job. 6 months, maybe a year at most. A year. They wanted me to share my space, my sanctuary, my life for a year. Maybe more. I don't think that's feasible, I began. But Mom cut me off. Anna, I'm disappointed in you. Your sister needs help, and you're in a position to provide it. Don't be selfish. Selfish. There it was. The word that had been wielded against me my entire life. Selfish for wanting my own room as a kid. Selfish for choosing college over helping with the family business. Selfish for prioritizing my career over marriage and babies. And now, selfish for wanting to live alone in the apartment I'd bought with my own money. I'll think about it, I said, which was a lie. I'd already thought about it, and the answer was hell no. But I needed time to figure out how to extract myself from this situation without becoming the family villain. That night, I lay awake formulating exit strategies. Maybe I could help Melissa find an apartment, even offer to pay the security deposit. Maybe I could talk to Brad, see if they could work something out for the kids' sake. Maybe I could fake my own death and start over in another country. Okay, that last one was a bit extreme, but desperate times and all that. The next morning, Melissa was in an unusually good mood. She hummed while making breakfast, using my eggs and bacon without asking, as had become her habit. The boys were dressed and ready for school without the usual morning meltdown. Warning bells should have been going off in my head. So, she said casually, sliding a plate in front of me, Mom told me about your conversation yesterday. I took a bite of eggs to buy time. Oh, I just want you to know how grateful I am. Really, Anna. I know this hasn't been easy for you, having us here, but knowing that you're willing to let us stay longer, it means everything. I said I'd think about it, I corrected. She waved this off. Oh, I know you. You always come through in the end. You're such a good person, Anna. So responsible and reliable. Responsible and reliable. Code words for doormat and pushover. Melissa, I really don't think. Boys, she called out, cutting me off. Come say goodbye to Aunt Anna before school, and remember to thank her for letting us live here. Live here, not stay here, live here. The distinction was not lost on me. Alex mumbled something that might have been thanks. Ben just stared at me with those big eyes that looked so much like his mother's. Then they were gone. Whirlwind out the door to school. And I was left alone with the sinking feeling that I'd already lost this battle. The next few weeks established a new routine. Melissa job hunted, which seemed to consist mainly of scrolling through her phone while watching daytime TV. She'd occasionally go on interviews, always asking me to watch the boys, always returning with stories of why the job wasn't quite right. Too far away, not enough flexibility. The manager seemed creepy. The pay was insulting. Meanwhile, I became the de facto parent. School pickup and drop-off fell to me because Melissa's car was making a weird noise that she never got checked. Homework help became my responsibility because you're so much smarter than me, Anna. Dinner was my job because Melissa was emotionally exhausted from the divorce proceedings. The boys, sensing the power shift, began to push boundaries even further. Alex discovered he could manipulate his mother into overruling any discipline I tried to enforce. Mom said I don't have to listen to you, became his favorite phrase. Ben, taking cues from his older brother, ramped up the tantrums and destructive behavior. My work performance continued to decline. I missed another deadline, then another. My supervisor scheduled a one-on-one meeting that I knew wouldn't be pleasant. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was failing at the job that paid for the apartment I no longer enjoyed living in. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in May. I'd had a particularly brutal day of meetings, made worse by Ben's meltdown during an important client call. Melissa had promised to keep the boys quiet, then disappeared for a quick errand that lasted 3 hours. I'd had to mute myself repeatedly while Ben screamed about wanting a different snack. My clients undoubtedly wondering what kind of unprofessional chaos was happening on my end. When Melissa finally returned, she was carrying shopping bags from expensive stores and reeked of alcohol. A lunch date, she explained, with a potential employer. The shopping was retail therapy because the job hadn't panned out. How did you pay for all this? I asked, eyeing the designer labels. Oh, I used the credit card Brad gave me for emergencies. He'll just have to deal with it. She giggled, definitely tipsy. Besides, I deserve nice things after what he put me through. I retreated to my office, trying to salvage what was left of my workday. Around 7. Melissa knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a habit that drove me insane. Hey, can you watch the boys tomorrow night? I have a date. I spun around in my chair. A date? You're getting divorced. She shrugged. Separated, and Brad's already fucking his secretary. So why should I sit at home like a nun? This guy's really cute. We matched on Bumble. He's taking me to that new French place downtown. I have a project deadline tomorrow. I'll be working late. Come on, Anna. I never get to go out. Please, just this once. Just this once. Like watching the boys was just this once. Like staying a few extra days was just this once. Like every imposition and boundary violation was just this once. Until all those onces added up to always. No, I said firmly. I'm sorry, but I can't keep doing this. You need to find a babysitter. Her face transformed, the flirty sweetness replaced by something harder. Wow. I ask for one little favor, and you act like I'm ruining your life. One little favor, Melissa. I've been basically raising your kids for the past 2 months What? She stepped closer, eyes flashing. While I try to rebuild my life after my husband destroyed our family, while I deal with lawyers and court dates and trying to figure out how to support 2 kids on my own. God, Anna, you're so selfish. There was that word again, selfish. I'm selfish. I stood up, matching her stance. I've given up my home, my privacy, my work schedule, your what? Your precious alone time, your neat little life where you don't have to think about anyone but yourself. Must be nice to live in your perfect little bubble while the rest of us deal with real problems. Get out, I said quietly. She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Excuse me. Get out of my office, now. Or what, you'll kick us out. Go ahead, explain to Mom and Dad how you threw your poor divorced sister and her babies out on the street. I'm sure that'll go over well at Christmas dinner. She slammed the door on her way out, hard enough to rattle the pictures on my wall. I sank back into my chair, shaking with anger and something else. Fear. Maybe. Because she was right. I was trapped by family expectations and my own inability to be the villain in anyone's story but my own. That night, I reviewed the security footage from the past week. It was worse than I'd thought. Melissa going through my closet when I wasn't home. Alex getting into my electronics drawer and pocketing items. Ben drawing on walls I hadn't discovered yet. And Melissa. Always Melissa, helping herself to whatever she wanted with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never been told no. But it was the conversation I overheard that really got to me. Melissa on the phone with a friend, laughing about her uptight sister, who was basically a live-in nanny and too much of a pushover to do anything about it. She'll never kick us out, she said, voice dripping with confidence. Where else would we go? Besides, I've got Mom and Dad on my side. Anna's always been the difficult one. They're just grateful someone's keeping an eye on her, making sure she doesn't die alone with her computers. I closed the laptop. Decision made. If Melissa wanted to play games, fine. But she'd forgotten that the quiet, nerdy sister she'd dismissed all these years had grown up to be a software engineer. And software engineers are very, very good at solving problems. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. I made breakfast, helped get the boys ready for school, even wished Melissa luck on her date that evening. She seemed surprised by my cheerfulness but didn't question it. Gift horses and all that. While she was at school drop-off, I began my research. Washington state tenant laws, eviction procedures, legal requirements for house guests versus tenants. The news wasn't great. After 30 days, she might be considered a tenant, which would make removing her much more complicated. But she'd only been here 3 weeks. I still had time. I also did something else. I called Brad. He answered on the second ring, sounding tired. Anna, is everything okay? Are the boys? The boys are fine, I assured him. But we need to talk about Melissa. There was a long pause. What has she done now? That question told me everything I needed to know about their marriage dynamics. We met for coffee that afternoon while Melissa was at another job interview. Brad looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past 2 months. He listened while I explained the situation, his face growing more haggard with each detail. I've been trying to see the boys, he said when I finished. She won't let me. Claims I'm a bad influence, that I'll confuse them. I've hired a lawyer, but these things take time. She told them you abandoned them, I said gently. His face crumpled. They're my whole world, Anna. Everything I did, everything I built, was for them. And now? The affair, I prompted. He laughed bitterly. There was no affair. Sarah's my secretary. Yes, but she's 60 years old and happily married. Melissa knew that. She also knew that accusing me of cheating would get her sympathy and make me look like the bad guy. I stared at him. But why would she? Because she was the one having an affair. Has been for over a year. I found out, confronted her, said we needed counseling. She responded by taking the kids and leaving, then spinning this whole story about me being the cheater. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. All this time, I'd been enabling a lie. Worse, I'd been keeping a father from his children based on that lie. I have security footage, I said slowly, of everything that's been happening at my apartment, including some conversations that might be relevant to your custody case. Hope flickered in his eyes for the first time. "You'd do that?" "The boys need their father, and frankly, I need my apartment back." We spent the next hour strategizing. Brad's lawyer was very interested in the security footage, especially the parts where Melissa was clearly intoxicated while supposedly watching the children. The fact that she'd been leaving them with me for hours at a time while she went on dates would also be relevant. "I don't want to take them from her," Brad said. "Despite everything, she's their mother. But this current situation, it's not good for anyone." I agreed. The boys were acting out because they were confused and hurt. They needed stability, routine, and both their parents. Not a crash pad at their aunt's apartment while their mother played the victim. That evening, Melissa left for her date looking like $1 million in a dress I'm pretty sure came from my closet. The boys and I had a quiet night. I made mac and cheese, their favorite, and we watched a movie. For the first time in weeks, they seemed like normal kids instead of tiny terrorists. "Aunt Anna," Ben said as I tucked him in, "are we going to live here forever?" "No, sweetheart, this is just temporary." "I miss my dad," he whispered. My heart broke a little. "I know. Maybe you'll see him soon." Alex, listening from the top bunk, added, "Mom says Dad doesn't want us anymore." "Your mom is upset right now," I said carefully. Sometimes adults say things they don't mean when they're upset, but I know for a fact that your dad loves you very much and misses you terribly. "Really?" Alex tried to sound skeptical, but hope crept into his voice. "Really?" They fell asleep easier than usual, and I spent the rest of the evening backing up all the relevant security footage to multiple drives. One for Brad's lawyer, one for my own records, and one just in case. Melissa rolled in around 2 a.m., drunk and giggly. I heard her stumbling around the living room, knocking things over, before finally passing out on the couch. The cameras caught it all, including her leaving her purse open with what looked suspiciously like a small bag of white powder visible inside. The next morning, she was in full hangover mode, snapping at the boys and complaining about the noise they were making. I took them out for breakfast to give her space and myself time to think. The situation was escalating, and I needed to act before things got worse. When we returned, Melissa was on the phone with our mother, crying dramatically. "She's being so mean to me. Mom, I think she's going to kick us out." "What kind of person does that to family?" I waited until she hung up, then confronted her. "We need to talk." "About what? How you're jealous that I have kids and a life while you're married to your job." "About the fact that you've been lying to everyone. There was no affair with Brad's secretary. You were the one cheating." Her face went white, then red. "How dare you?" "I talked to Brad. I've also been documenting everything that's been happening here. The drinking, the drugs, the neglect. You've been spying on me." She stood up, swaying slightly. "You fucking bitch. You've been recording me." "It's my apartment. I have security cameras, which you'd have known if you'd asked before moving in." "I'll sue you for invasion of privacy." "Go ahead. I'm sure the family court judge will be very interested in the footage of you passed out drunk while your children were unsupervised, or the drugs in your purse, or the recordings of you coaching the boys to lie about their father." She lunged at me, but I stepped back, letting her stumble. "You're ruining everything," she screamed. "This was supposed to be my fresh start." "Your fresh start was built on lies and manipulation. It's over, Melissa." What happened next is burned into my memory. She grabbed a glass vase from the side table, one of my favorite pieces, a hand-blown creation I'd bought to celebrate my promotion, and raised it over her head. "Put it down," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "Or what you'll call the cops on your own sister." "If I have to." She threw it, but not at me. She turned and hurled it at the wall, where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. The boys, who had been in their room, came running at the sound. "Mommy." Ben's voice was small and scared. Melissa didn't even look at him. She was staring at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over." But it had to be. I gave her 24 hours to leave. Told her if she wasn't gone by then, I'd file for a restraining order and turn over all the evidence to Brad's lawyer. She tried every manipulation in her playbook. Tears, threats, guilt, even attempting to seduce me into changing my mind by promising she'd be a better house guest. When none of that worked, she called our parents. The resulting phone call was brutal. "How can you do this to your sister?" Mom demanded. "She's family." "Being family doesn't give her the right to destroy my life." "Destroy your life? She's just staying with you. She's been lying to all of us." "Mom? Brad never cheated." "She did. She's been using me as a free babysitter while she goes out partying. She's drinking heavily, possibly using drugs, and the boys are suffering." "I don't believe you. Melissa would never." "I have proof, video evidence. Would you like to see it?" The silence on the other end was deafening. Dad took over the phone. "Even if what you're saying is true, throwing her out isn't the answer. Family works through problems together." "No, Dad. Melissa creates problems and expects everyone else to solve them. I'm done being her solution." "If you do this, Anna, there will be consequences. Don't expect us to take your side." "I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm asking you to look at the facts instead of automatically believing Melissa's version of events." They hung up on me. The next 24 hours were tense. Melissa alternated between packing dramatically and trying to change my mind. She made several more calls to our parents, each one more hysterical than the last. She posted vague messages on social media about family betrayal and being homeless with 2 children. But she also made a mistake, a big one. Alex had been unusually quiet throughout the drama. But that evening, he approached me in my office. "Aunt Anna, I need to tell you something." I turned from my computer. "What is it, sweetie?" "Mom told us to say bad things about you to Grandma and Grandpa. And she said if anyone asks, we should say you were mean to us." I kept my expression neutral. "Oh." "She also said we should tell Dad we don't want to see him, even though that's not true. And she said if we don't do what she says, we'll have to live in a shelter." I pulled him into a hug. "Thank you for telling me the truth. That was very brave." "I don't want to lie anymore," he whispered. "I just want things to be normal again." "They will be," I promised, "soon." I recorded our conversation with Alex's permission. He was old enough to understand what was happening and tired of being used as a pawn. Ben was too young to fully grasp the situation, but he followed his brother's lead. The morning Melissa was supposed to leave, she played her final card. I woke up to find her in the living room with 2 police officers. My heart sank. "Is there a problem?" I asked, though I could guess what was happening. "This lady says you're illegally evicting her and her children," one officer said. "She claims she's a tenant here. She's a house guest who's overstayed her welcome. She's been here less than 30 days, and I have documentation of our original agreement that this was a temporary visit." Melissa smirked. "I've been getting mail here. That makes me a tenant." She produced several envelopes addressed to her at my apartment. My stomach dropped until I looked closer. They were all postmarked within the last 3 days. She'd been planning this. "Officers, I have security footage of her deliberately having mail sent here in the last 72 hours for the express purpose of establishing false tenancy. I also have recordings of her stating this was temporary and that she was actively looking for her own place." The officers looked tired. They probably dealt with domestic disputes like this all the time. "Ma'am," one said to Melissa, "do you have a lease? Any proof of paying rent?" "Family doesn't need leases," she said, but her confidence was wavering. "Then you're a guest, not a tenant. The homeowner has asked you to leave. I suggest you comply." "This is bullshit," Melissa exploded. "She's kicking out her own sister with children." "The children's father is on his way to pick them up," I said calmly. "He has joint custody, despite what she may have told you." That had been arranged the night before. Brad was more than ready to take his boys, and his lawyer had fast-tracked an emergency custody hearing based on the evidence I'd provided. Melissa went ballistic. "You called Brad, you had no right. They're his children too, and unlike you, he's not a liar or a manipulator." She lunged at me again, and this time the officers had to restrain her. That's when things went from bad to worse. "She assaulted me," Melissa screamed. Last week, she pushed me down the stairs. I have bruises. I stared at her in shock. What, I never touched you? Check her, Melissa demanded. I documented everything. One officer looked skeptical, but they had to follow procedure. Ma'am, these are serious allegations. Do you have any evidence of this assault? Melissa pulled out her phone and showed them photos of bruises on her arms and legs. My mind raced. When had she taken those? How had she gotten those bruises? Then I remembered the security footage from 3 nights ago. Melissa, drunk, trying to navigate the stairs in heels and falling. She'd laughed it off at the time, but apparently, she'd been planning this even then. I have security footage of the night she got those bruises, I said. She fell down the stairs while intoxicated. I wasn't even home. I was at a company dinner, which I can prove with receipts and witnesses. You're lying, Melissa shrieked. She's always been jealous of me. She pushed me because she wants my children. Even the officers looked dubious at that. Who would want someone else's children badly enough to assault them? Check the footage, I insisted. It's all there. Every interaction we've had is recorded. One officer radioed for backup while the other tried to calm Melissa down. She was in full meltdown mode now, screaming about lawsuits and family betrayal and how I'd ruined her life. The boys watched from their doorway, tears streaming down their faces. This wasn't the mother they knew, or maybe it was, and they were just seeing her without the mask for the first time. When Brad arrived, Melissa completely lost it. She tried to block him from entering, screaming that he was a cheater and abuser. The boys, however, ran to their father like they'd been freed from prison. Daddy, Ben sobbed, we missed you so much. I missed you too, buddy, so much. Even Alex, trying to be tough, broke down in his father's arms. Mom said you didn't want us anymore. Never, Brad said fiercely. I want you always and forever. Melissa tried to grab the boys, but the officers intervened. Ma'am, he has legal custody rights. You can't prevent him from seeing his children. They're my children, she screamed. He doesn't deserve them. That's when she made her biggest mistake. In her rage and desperation, she grabbed Alex's arm hard enough to leave marks, trying to pull him away from Brad. You're hurting me, Alex cried out. The officers immediately stepped in, separating Melissa from the children. What had been a civil dispute was now potentially criminal. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down. One officer said, if you continue this behavior, we'll have to arrest you. Arrest me, I'm the victim here. She's stealing my children. She's destroying my life. She spun around to face me, and the look in her eyes was pure venom. You did this. You planned all of this. Well, guess what? I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone what you really are. I'll make sure you never see these kids again. I'll ruin your career, your reputation, everything. Ma'am, threats aren't helping your case, the officer warned. But Melissa was beyond reason. She lunged at me one more time, and this time, the officers had no choice. They arrested her for assault, child endangerment, and making threats. As they led her away in handcuffs, she screamed over her shoulder, "This isn't over. Anna, I'll make you pay for this." The boys clung to their father, sobbing. The apartment fell silent except for their tears and the sound of my heart pounding. It was over. It had to be over. But I should have known better. Melissa had one more card to play, and it was worse than anything I could have imagined. The next few days were surreal. Brad took the boys to his apartment, which he'd maintained despite Melissa's claims that he'd abandoned the family. My parents called repeatedly, leaving increasingly hostile voicemails. I didn't answer. I needed time to process everything that had happened. I deep-cleaned my apartment, trying to erase every trace of the chaos. The walls were repainted to cover Ben's artwork. The broken vase was swept up and thrown away. The guest room was stripped bare and returned to its original state. But I couldn't erase the memories. The security footage sat on my hard drives like a ticking time bomb, evidence of how quickly family could turn into enemies. Melissa was released on bail the next day. Our parents posted it, of course. She was ordered to stay away from me and to only see the children under supervised visitation. Brad's emergency custody petition had been granted based on the evidence and her arrest. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought she'd realize she'd lost and focus on rebuilding her relationship with her children. I thought wrong. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. I didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. Is this Anna Chen? The voice was official, businesslike. Yes. This is Detective Morrison from the Brookdale Police Department. We need you to come down to the station to answer some questions. My blood ran cold. Questions about what? There's been an allegation made against you. It would be best if we discuss this in person. I knew immediately what Melissa had done, but I went anyway. Armed with a USB drive containing all the security footage and a lawyer I'd retained just in case. The allegation was worse than I'd imagined. Melissa had claimed that I'd been abusing the boys during their stay. She'd taken photos of Alex's bruised arm, the bruises she'd caused, and told the police I'd done it. She'd coached the boys to tell lies about me hitting them, screaming at them, denying them food. But here's where Melissa's plan fell apart. She didn't know about the cameras in every room. She didn't know I'd recorded her coaching the boys, recorded her causing those bruises, recorded every interaction we'd had. Detective Morrison's expression changed as he reviewed the footage. What had started as a serious investigation into child abuse turned into something else entirely. This is comprehensive, he said finally. I work in home security. I take it seriously. I can see that, and this shows Mrs. Chen causing the bruises herself. Yes. And here's the footage of her telling the children to lie about me. And here's her passed out drunk while the children were unsupervised. And here's her with what appears to be illegal substances. The detective leaned back in his chair. You know what this means, right? This isn't just a false accusation. This is filing a false police report, conspiracy, potentially even child abuse, given that she coached minors to lie to law enforcement. I nodded. I know. Are you willing to press charges? Was I part of me just wanted this to be over? But another part, the part that had been pushed around and manipulated for years, wanted justice. Yes, I said, I want to press charges. The detective nodded. We'll need copies of all this footage, and we'll need to interview the children again, properly this time. Their father has temporary full custody. I'm sure he'll cooperate. I left the police station feeling drained but vindicated. Melissa had played her final card, and it had backfired spectacularly. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal procedures. Melissa was arrested again, this time for filing a false police report and child endangerment. The boys, in sessions with a child psychologist, revealed the full extent of their mother's manipulation, not just about me, but about their father, their living situation, even their own feelings. My parents, faced with overwhelming evidence, finally had to confront the truth about their golden child. They showed up at my apartment one evening, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen them. We owe you an apology, Dad said without preamble. I let them in but didn't offer comfort. They'd chosen their side, and it hadn't been mine. We've always known Melissa could be difficult, Mom admitted, but we never imagined she'd go this far. You enabled her, I said bluntly. Every time she faced consequences, you bailed her out. Every time someone called her on her behavior, you made excuses. This is the result. They couldn't argue with that. We sat in uncomfortable silence until Mom finally asked, What happens now? Now Melissa faces the consequences of her actions. Brad raises his boys with the truth instead of lies. And I get my life back. And us? Dad asked quietly. Where do we fit? I considered the question. They were my parents, but they'd shown me where their loyalties lay. That depends on you. Are you going to keep enabling Melissa keep making excuses, or are you going to finally hold her accountable? They didn't have an answer. They left soon after, and I didn't hear from them for weeks. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Melissa, in a move that surprised no one who truly knew her, tried to play the victim card at every turn. She hired a lawyer who specialized in defending women in custody battles, painting herself as a stressed single mother who'd made mistakes but didn't deserve to lose her children. But the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage, the testimony from the boys, the police reports, Brad's documentation of her affair and lies, it all painted a picture of a manipulative, dangerous person who used her children as weapons. The day of the final custody hearing, I sat in the courtroom as a witness. Melissa wouldn't look at me. She'd lost weight, her designer clothes replaced with a conservative suit probably chosen by her lawyer. She looked like what she was pretending to be, a desperate mother fighting for her children. But when the boys testified via closed-circuit TV, the truth came out. Alex, brave and articulate for his age, told the judge how his mother had made them lie, how she'd said their father didn't love them, how she'd hurt him when he tried to go to his dad, how scared they'd been living with her mood swings and drinking. Ben, younger but equally clear, talked about missing his dad, about Aunt Anna being nice and Mommy being mean to her, about wanting to go home with Daddy and never live in Aunt Anna's apartment again. Melissa broke down crying, but it felt like another performance. The judge certainly seemed to think so. In the end, Brad was awarded full custody. Melissa got supervised visitation, contingent on completing anger management and parenting classes. She was also ordered to pay child support, which almost made me laugh. She'd been living off Brad for years, then off me. Now she'd have to actually work. As we left the courthouse, Melissa finally looked at me. The hatred in her eyes was unchanged. But there was something else there too. Defeat. Maybe. Or the realization that her actions had consequences she couldn't manipulate her way out of. "I hope you're happy," she said. "I hope you get help," I replied. She laughed bitterly. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." And for me, it was. The criminal charges were still pending. But I'd done my part. I'd stood up to the family bully, protected my nephews, and reclaimed my life. Brad thanked me profusely, promising the boys would always know how their aunt had helped them. The boys themselves seemed lighter, happier, more like normal children now that they weren't carrying the weight of their mother's lies. My parents eventually came around, though our relationship would never be the same. They'd shown me who they really were, and I couldn't forget that. But they were trying, attending therapy themselves to understand how they'd enabled Melissa's behavior for so long. As for Melissa, she pled guilty to reduced charges to avoid jail time, community service, probation, mandatory therapy. She moved back to Riverside, got a job at a retail store, and by all accounts was finally living the life she'd pretended was beneath her. I sometimes wonder if she ever thinks about how different things could have been. If she'd been honest from the beginning, if she'd been grateful instead of entitled, if she'd been a sister instead of a parasite. But then I remember that people like Melissa don't think that way. In her mind, she's still the victim. I'm still the villain who destroyed her life. The fact that she destroyed her own life with lies and manipulation will never occur to her. My apartment is mine again. Quiet, clean, exactly how I want it. The security cameras still record everything. But now they only capture the peaceful life of someone who learned to set boundaries and enforce them. The boys visit sometimes, with Brad's permission. They're doing well in therapy, learning to process what happened. Alex wants to be an engineer like me. Ben just wants to be happy. Both seem like achievable goals now that they're free from their mother's toxic influence. I've been promoted at work. My performance back to its previous levels now that I can actually focus. My home office is once again a sanctuary, not a hiding place from chaos. The guest room has been converted into a proper office, with no bed. I'm not hosting any more long-term guests. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that first phone call, Melissa's tearful voice telling me about Brad's supposed affair. How different would things have been if I'd said no? If I'd been the selfish sister she'd always accused me of being. But I couldn't have said no. Not because I'm weak or a pushover, but because despite everything, I'd hoped she really did just need a few days to clear her head. I'd hoped family meant something to her the way it meant something to me. Now I know better. Family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Melissa taught me that lesson in the hardest way possible. but it's one I'll never forget. The security footage from those months is archived now, evidence if it's ever needed again. But I don't watch it anymore. I don't need to. The memories are enough to remind me why boundaries matter, why enabling isn't love, and why sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their actions. Melissa was right about one thing. I did plan it all, not from the beginning. But once I realized what she was doing, I planned my response carefully and executed it perfectly. I'm not sorry. I'm not guilty. I'm not the villain in this story, no matter what she tells people. I'm just Anna, software engineer, apartment owner, aunt to 2 great kids. And finally, no one's doormat. The last time I heard from Melissa was a text on my birthday. Happy birthday, sis. I'll never forgive you. I deleted it without responding. Forgiveness, like respect, has to be earned. And some bridges, once burned, are better left as ashes. My apartment is peaceful now. My life is my own. The boys are thriving with their father. Even my parents are slowly learning what healthy relationships look like. As for Melissa, she's learning too, whether she wants to or not. Learning that actions have consequences. Learning that lies eventually crumble. Learning that using people, even family, especially family, comes with a price. It's a hard lesson, but a necessary one. And despite everything, I hope she learns it well. Not for my sake, but for hers. Because until she does, she'll keep repeating the same patterns, burning bridges and blaming everyone else for the fires she set. But that's not my problem anymore. My problem is debugging code, meeting project deadlines, and deciding what to have for dinner in my quiet, clean, Melissa-free apartment. It's a good life, a peaceful life, a life I earned by standing up for myself and refusing to be used anymore. And if that makes me selfish, well, I can live with that. Because sometimes being selfish is just another word for having self-respect. And that's a lesson Melissa taught me, even if it wasn't the one she intended. The sun sets over Brookdale as I write this, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. From my 15th floor window, the city looks peaceful, full of possibilities. Somewhere out there, Melissa is probably plotting her next move, convinced that somehow she'll find a way to make me pay for holding her accountable. But here's what she doesn't understand: I've already won. Not because I defeated her, but because I freed myself. From guilt, from manipulation, from the exhausting cycle of enabling and excuses. I'm free. And that's the best revenge of all.